So thank you very much for joining everybody. Thank you, Keith, for taking the time being with us, talking, my apologies, talking more today around sustainable and affordable building and housing for people. And also thank you for joining Herman Harking and also everybody else on the call today. Now, why we have this discussion and the pleasure to have Mr. Keith Hutchings from the Comfortable Housing Project over here today with us is Frogeex is a green tech marketplace that brings together providers and stakeholders all around the segment of sustainable building and sustainable living. Now, housing, that is, automatically you think about this, about either ecological buildings, sustainable green buildings, whatever. And passive solar housing or solar houses in general, the utilization of solar energy is a huge topic. Nowadays, we see where the world goes. We are having one crisis after another that basically also prepares a little bit the ground for a big change that is in many cases also inevitable because it's just not relevant to the standards, to the requirements of the future as well, especially when we talk about climate change. We know that the conditions are changing. There are different weather patterns or weather occurrences that are gonna be the standard if we don't take appropriate action. And this is also why all the elements of sustainable buildings that help us to adapt on this type of conditions are just very useful to know about, know the differences. And this is why we have Mr. Keith Hutchings today here with us. Now, just to give a little bit of an intro, and Keith, please take it from there, or please feel free to add any more projects because you're involved in many areas and engaged in many areas. Keith is an entrepreneur, a speaker, marketer, and a storyteller in the segment of sustainable building, the founder of the Comfortable Housing Project based in Australia, well networked in the building segment. So very, of course, with the focus on sustainability. So very much common ground for us in terms of Frogeex. Now with this, Keith, I would like to hand over the word to you to, share a little bit your perspective on what affordable and efficient housing looks like and what it does not do eventually for its inhabitants. And, also all the type of challenges that you see based on the experience. I mean, you're many years now in the segment, also very hands-on on the project. What you see as a challenge, what we eventually need to also maybe approach more.
Thank you, Jana. That was a lovely introduction. It's warmed my heart. So it's Keith Hutchings from the Comfortable Home Project. If you're seeing this and you would like to talk, I'm living on LinkedIn, so come and find me there and let's connect. Now I'm going to do the share screen thing and hope this works. And you are now sharing screen and from beginning. Okay. Yes. It should be going to the full screen. Sorry. I'm not a big PowerPoint user.
Eventually, if I may suggest, Keith, maybe you can go to the right bottom corner. There should be a small button, exactly, next to the Zoom element with the flip chart, or what is it? Flip chart. Maybe to a little bit more to exact. Yes, a little bit. Two icons to the right. Yes.
Oh, where it says slideshow. Who would have thunk it?
Yeah, right. many small buttons. So we got it.
It didn't do that earlier. I don't know. It's messing with my head. Okay. So as I said, I'm Keith Hutchings. I'm going to talk today about doing housing better. So I'm just going to step through this. So what I'm going to do for today is I'm going to give a brief explanation of passive solar. We who are working in this niche of the housing industry have done such a terrible job of marketing this technology that most people have no idea what passive solar is. So I'm going to take a few minutes to explain it. I'm going to tell you why you wouldn't want to build a passive solar house, because I think that's really important. You know, when we're marketing things, we're always selling why you would, but, you know, speaking to the negative is important. I have spent the last 6 years interviewing people living in passive solar houses. So there's some stories of people's own houses. So I'm just going to take a few minutes and tell you those stories. And then I want to spend some time talking about actually how we can be marketing the idea of the solutions to climate change better for people, because I have spent the last 6 years teaching myself marketing and learning how to speak to people about climate change, because we've been talking about climate change since the 1970s, and we have not substantially shifted the needle, which tells me that's feedback that says we're doing something wrong. And so I have some ideas that are, I think, will give people some good starting points on how we can be talking about climate change better. After the first two parts, the brief explanation, I'm going to take some questions if people have any questions, because I may not explain it perfectly. That's on me if you don't understand it. And the second part, there's some humor in there, and humor doesn't always translate well. So again, I want to take some questions if you didn't understand what I've said. The case studies, it's just straightforward, so we don't need to discuss them at the end. And then when I finish the selling sustainability part, I'd like to have a longer conversation with people about what, you know, what we can do, how we can do this better, and take questions on my thoughts, but also hear other people's thoughts. So what is passive solar? Big question. So the first answer that everybody asked me, or the first question everyone asked me is that like solar panels? Oops, skipped a slide. So passive solar, when people talk about, because it's got the word in it, I keep saying we're terrible at marketing. So passive solar is not solar panels. Solar panels are a technology. They're the thing you put up on the roof or you put in the parking lot. They generate energy. You use then that energy to perhaps run your air conditioner to cool down your house, to make it, or to heat your house. You make it comfortable. The problem with technology is technology always eventually fails, whether it's 3 years or 12 years or 25 years, it will eventually fail. Passive solar is a design solution. It's designing your home in a way that it is comfortable most days of the year throughout the lifetime of the home. So there it is. There's that slide. It was in the wrong order. Not solar panels. So here's a little image that I grabbed off of the web that shows the basics of how passive solar works. So many of the people watching this today are going to be in the northern hemisphere. So if that gets confusing, because we're in the southern hemisphere, we in the southern hemisphere are pointing the living areas of our house towards the north. The way I best explain it is that you want the openings, the living areas of your house, pointed towards the equator, wherever that is where you are living, so that you can bring, in the winter when it's cold, you are bringing the sun into your house and warming the mass of the house. You can see across the bottom of that drawing, there is the ground, the footings, also the walls of the house will have mass to them. There'll be brick, stone, concrete, something with mass in them to absorb the heat. Another part of that, or the converse of that, is keeping the sun out of the house in the summer. So this can be done with roof eaves, also needs to be done with like shade sails, something to keep the sun's heat. A lot of times you'll see houses where outside of the sliding doors, there's a big area of brick paving. That's what they do here. They'll have this paving. That paving on a summer day where maybe it's 35 degrees Celsius outside, but the paving can be 50 degrees, it can be 60 degrees. It's absorbing that heat and then reflecting it into the house. So you want to have at least 5 meters of shade sail or something that's going to keep the sun off of the exterior of the house. What they show here in the picture also is your landscaping is the deciduous trees. It's using trees that have leaves on them in the summer to shade the front of the house, but then allows that heat to come in the winter. And then the last important part of passive solar is being able to open the house to the prevailing breeze. So here in Perth, where I am, the prevailing breeze in the summer comes out of the southwest. And an ideally designed passive solar house will have small windows on that southwest side, and then on the opposite side of the house, it has big like sliding windows, sliding doors, so that you create a vacuum or a Venturi effect where it pushes the heat of the house out. Also, you will have houses where there's a pitched roof and you have windows high on the wall that allows the convection to carry the heat of the house out. I've seen a house where it had a row of windows across the bottom, very low, and then another row of windows. And as the cool air happens in the afternoon, the cool air comes across the ground, comes into the house, and pushes the hot air out of the house and cools the house down very rapidly. It's all really simple. It's a few set of rules. I've been in a number of houses where they were owner builders. I like to say this is not cancer research. There are people who are building designers with many years experience, and they will do the next kind of level up. But I've also been in a lot of houses which are built perfectly backwards. They are anti-passive solar houses. And so the result is they are hotter in the summer and colder in the winter. And that's how most of our houses are built. They're given no thought to how they could be designed to use the orientation of the block, where the sun is, all those things to make the house more comfortable. Just on that Venturi effect, the story I like to tell is being in a house of someone had a passive solar house. It was the first really hot day of spring. So it was about 30 degrees. Don't know what that translates to. If we have any American listeners, you'll have to work it out. And we were standing outside, and he said, it's a little too hot. Can we step inside? So we step inside his house. It's 10 degrees cooler in there. And I've got this gale blowing down the back of my neck. It's kind of cold. It's almost too cool. And I think to myself, this guy's a liar. He says this is a passive solar house, but he's got an air conditioner running, cooling down the house. That's why it's so cool in here. So I turn around and look behind me. There's no air conditioner. That breeze is coming in from the front door. And this is a house in the back of another house. It was, what we call a battle axe block here, where they did infill what used to be the backyard. So it's a long, narrow driveway pointing the wrong way. And I later spoke to the building designer, and he said, oh yeah, we shaped the roof in a way that it created an airfoil which would draw the air through the house. So he created it by the shape of the roof and the way it pointed, it created a greater vacuum to just suck the hot air out of the house on this hot day. So those are the elements of building design. And then, of course, the last element is insulation. It's insulation in the walls and insulation in the roof. And part of that is also having a way to get the heat out of the roof with fans or vents that can then be closed off in winter. So you're keeping that heat into the house in winter and getting the heat out in summer. And also keeping the house from being warmed up. And that's really the basics of passive solar design. Now, does anybody have any questions before I move on to the next bit?
I would have one eventually.
Yep.
Before maybe some other questions come up. So, I mean, amazing picture. Thanks a lot, Keith, for sharing the visual. I mean, it's always a little bit more helpful to see it. But the question which I would have, I mean, are there any standard efficiencies that you look at in terms of, because we talk about cooling, heating, is it like how much energy is being saved when we, for example, work with a design or designing a passive solar house? What is the type of standard, efficiencies that
the thing is that in the average energy expenses of a house, about half of that cost is going to be air conditioning if you have a badly designed house. What we're doing is we're designing our homes badly and then making up for bad design with air conditioning. Mm-hmm. And about half of the average family's energy costs is air conditioning. So so that's heating or cooling. Now, if you're in the north of the winter, you're probably not going to be able to design a house that has no heating whatsoever. Mm-hmm. But that the more you're insulating, the more you're keeping your heat in the house in the winter, the less energy it's going to require to warm it up. Mm-hmm. And I'll talk a bit about that when I talk about the case studies.
Okay.
But that's kind of a how long is a piece of string question because every house, every location, every climate is different. But what we're always looking to do is reduce that as much as possible. And the reason why I believe that's important is because part of the solution to climate change is to turn over to a fully renewable energy source. But right now, people talk about, the trillions of whatever it is, kilojoules or kilowatts that are required to replace the energy that is provided from fossil fuels with the energy from renewable power. And what they say is that's impossible. And I say to them, well, what we need to actually do is reduce the amount of energy that we need in as many different places. So housing is a place where we could, with every individual house, if we can have the amount of energy that's required, that's going to be a substantial difference in the amount of wind turbines, batteries, solar panels, all those things that we need. Did that answer your question?
Absolutely. I mean, it's massive points that you mentioned, that you covered, that you just touched in your feedback. And it's really, I mean, when looking at the passive solar housing, it's a solution that seems to be durable, affordable, sustainable, and efficient at the same time. So really a top combination for maybe also markets, as you mentioned, where the conditions fit. So it's very hot already now. And the design can make up for a lot of additional investments that would be needed just to make it a little bit more pleasant to live in.
People have been building houses in Saudi Arabia for 5,000 years that are designed to cool themselves through airflow. They didn't have air conditioners 5,000 years ago. And these, what I'm told that these houses are just, you walk in and they're just cool, even though it's 50, maybe even 60 degrees outside. And so we know how to do this. And what people often say to me is, well, it's so expensive. How could we do this? And in some ways there's truth to that. It's like all lies, the best lies are the half truths.
Mhm.
Right now, because most people are not doing this, what you're building is a custom home. What we need to do is get to the point where this is the norm, and that the volume builders, the people who are building lots of houses, are working this way. And then through economies of scale, the costs will come down.
Mhm.
The other thing is that the building industry, at least here in Australia, they make their money on the square meter. So what they've been doing through their marketing for the last 40 or 50 years is encouraging people to get bigger and bigger and bigger houses, more rooms. And all of that has a cost. It has a cost in the build. It has a cost in the amount of embodied carbon in the building. And then it has a cost in heating and cooling that massive amount of air. And what a friend of mine, so the story I like to tell, a friend of mine who's a building designer, looked at a house that was from one of the volume builders. The clients came to him and said, can you we like this design, but can you improve it? Well, first of all, it was perfectly backwards. So all the living areas were to the south side, so the opposite of where the sun is.
Mhm.
So the first thing he did was spin it around 180 degrees. He turned, because of the orientation of the block, he turned the living areas 45 degrees within that block so that the sun would come into the house in the winter. And then he cut a third of the rooms out of the house. He said, what's this room? I said, well, we don't know. We don't even know why it's there. Oh, okay. He saved them with the eraser on the back end of his pencil, $50,000 in the build cost. $50,000 will buy you a lot of insulation in your walls. Mm-hmm. If you're not building rooms that no one is ever going to go into, which is what the building industry is telling people that they need. Basically the marketing is saying, if you don't have 17 bathrooms and 3 different TV rooms, your children will end up in prison and you will never sell your house. I do have a tendency to exaggerate a little bit, but it's almost perfectly true. Mm-hmm. The marketing is this: you'll never sell the house if it doesn't have a theater room. Yeah, but I'd rather sit in the lounge room with the kids. So
yes, got your point. Mm-hmm. And very interesting also in terms of regarding marketing. So marketing, we hear a lot, and we're going to certainly have a little bit more on towards the end of the presentation. One more question that I would have in terms of insulation. So you mentioned insulation, very strong element. I mean, the more we have, the better it can keep the heat in the house when it's required. Now, do you work also or eventually your partners or in the passive solar building or house? Do you consider specific bio-based insulation, or you look at not so much in the detail right now on it, or what's your perspective on that one?
I am working from a place of not being brand specific. Mm-hmm. So there are a lot of people that are doing interesting things. And when I started working on this, I said, this is a problem that needs a solution. And then people were saying to me, well, you should do this, or you should. And I thought, they're all really good solutions. Mm-hmm. The thing is, it's the levels that people want to choose in their sustainability, and each of those levels has a cost. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, hempcrete houses are becoming very popular here. There's a lot of interest in them, mm-hmm. but they are going to cost more because of the industry is not established here in Australia yet. Once it is, more people will be interested, but people are prepared now for those, you mentioned the kind of bio insulation. Those ways of doing things are going to be more costly because they're still very small markets and they're growing. So the question people need to balance is how sustainable they want to be versus what they can afford. if the house doesn't, so the house has to meet their needs, and their building designer or their architect, whoever's designing the actual house, is going to help guide them through that. There is, you could have a perfect house, but is it going to be worth, maybe that perfect house is going to cost you an extra $10,000. Now, there are people with allergies to chemicals. They cannot be around any fossil fuel based chemicals, and they have to be very careful about what materials they use. But if you're not like that, is it going to be sustainable for you to spend $10,000 on using those extra materials? That's a question for each individual homeowner. So, for example, there are, and is it, if you use a biologically based, like a rubber, natural tree rubber based paint, but it doesn't last as long as your oil based paint, and so you're having to repaint your walls every year, is that as sustainable as using an oil based paint that you paint every 10 years? Because your time has a value also in the sustainability kind of decision making that people have to make. There's some products that people use to seal outside decks here. And it's a great product, but you have to re-put it on every year. And what I keep seeing is people use it once, and then 5 years later, their deck is in really poor condition because they never took the Sunday afternoon to clear all the furniture off the deck and re-oil it. So using a product that was an oil-based, that was much more robust, is that more sustainable? These are the questions. If a client comes to me, I say, are you going to re-oil this? They say, I want to use the Oregon oil. I say, it's a great product. Love it. Love applying it. Are you going to re-oil your deck every year? They say, no, there's no way that's going to happen. I say, well, don't use that product then.
Yes, Keith, I mean, that's amazing point. And maybe I can, Herman, I see that you are on. I just want one more thing.
Yeah, I've still listened, but that's right, because in my nano cottage, we are busy with a new kind of isolation system. It's based on the technology from window isolation. So two plates, and then you suck the air out of it, so you have a high isolation. So irritation of chemicals you don't have, because you have always how more air it is out, how higher the isolation it is. And so that's the reason why we searching on that kind of technology, so that it's easy to make and easy to multiply it, and then you have always the lowest price, because the idea is that in India you need 25 square meter house. And I said, okay, but then I want to do it on my way, so high isolated, about an RC from 10. So instead of what we use in the Netherlands, 40 watt square meters, I need only 10 or maybe less. So that's a fraction lower than passive housing. You have a airtight house, and with a basement with PCMs, we can cool and heat the house with a ventilation system. So that's the reason why it's all cheap. And because on the end of the day, a house for the basic of the pyramids in India, it must cost about 1,500, 1,650 euros. So that's the reason why we must think first how you can isolate, or how you can use technology to improve the low price idea. And that's the reason why we have that kind of a solution in the nano cottage. And we must do also some testing that because when you drill in the wall and you drill too far, then you get a leak. And then we must know how we can fix that kind of problems, because otherwise you get in the winter cold, and that's not or in the summer you get it really warm. So that's not what you want. You want to have comfortable temperature in your house. And in the Netherlands is that 2021, and in India you talk about 26 or 28 C. So it's depending from where you built your house. And when you do that kind of way of isolation, it make no difference if you have on the North Pole or in the Sahara. You have always a house what is cool and warm as well, in which place you are as well. And when you have the construction in one piece or at least idea of one piece, even you have different kinds of pieces, then you have also earthquake resistant building, and that's in some places also important. So
yeah, sounds amazing.
Yeah.
I've sent you a connection request on LinkedIn, so I'll really look forward to learning more about this as you get it developed. And
Yeah.
it sounds like something that we're going to have to look at for Australia too, because housing affordability is a huge issue here. So, yes.
And what we do as well is the outside and inside wall is from elephant grass, because in the combination of kelp and ling, and so that you have a basic basic organic wall, what gives also the moisturizing in your house and constant the right level.
Sounds great. I'll look forward to learning more about it, but we better march along here. Otherwise, I won't get through everything.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
I can talk hours about that kind of
We'll
ideas,
get
but
along
okay.
famously in that area. I'm much the same. Let me move to the next slide. Okay, this is my favorite part. This is 3 reasons why you should not build a passive solar home. And I think Herman will particularly appreciate this. And I think Jana's heard it before, but she'll still laugh. Right. So the first reason why you should not build a passive solar home is if you are really competitive. There are people, and you may know someone like this, who is so competitive that if his energy bills arrive each month and they're bigger than the month before, then they get really excited because they feel like they've won. They've spent more money on energy than anybody else in their neighborhood, and they get really excited about that. Do you know anybody like that?
I guess there are some.
No, I've never met anyone who said yes to that, but I'm sure they must exist somewhere because we design our houses this way. And it's the only logical explanation, is that they're designing houses for people who are so competitive that they want to have the biggest energy bill possible. So yeah, that's it. But if you're like that, you don't want a passive solar house because you will never win, because by design, you will have your energy bills. So the next reason not to get a passive solar house is if you like shouting at your children. Now, I grew up in a house that was built in the 1920s. Through 6 months of the year, maybe 5 months of the year, my mother would be shouting at us, "Close the door, the heater's on." And then the other half of the year, she would be shouting at us, "Close the door, the air conditioner is on." And there was maybe 2 months of the year where there was a kind of sweet spot where it was warm enough outside or cool enough outside that she wouldn't be running those things and she wouldn't have to shout at the children. But the way the passive solar house is designed, the heat in the winter is stored in the mass of the building. So if you leave the doors open, because all children are born in barns and they just run out the door and leave the doors open, then when eventually you notice there's a howling gale coming through, you close up the doors and the heat comes out of the mass of the house and warms the house. So within 15 minutes, it's back to its original temperature had the doors not been open. In the summer, you're actually opening up the house and taking the heat out of the house using convection and the prevailing breeze and all those things. So if the kids have left the door open, they're actually helping you keep the house more comfortable. And so you cannot yell at them for making your house more comfortable. What's the fun in that? If you like yelling at your children, don't get a passive solar house. And then the last reason, which I think is in many ways the most telling of why you should not get a passive solar house, is if you like bathing in the stank of the house. Now, I had a roommate in college who liked to keep his gym shoes in the fridge so that they'd be nice and cool when he put them on. That was kind of nasty. But that's what we're doing with most houses. We're closing our houses up and we are refrigerating everything in them that's nasty, or we're even worse, heating the air of everything that's nasty in them. So your teenage son's gym shoes, they are nasty. And we're just cooling that sealed in air, the cat box, the piece of fish that fell down the back of the fridge and is turned into a science project, all those things we are closing. Because what people will say to me is, why should I build a passive solar house? I can just bung an extra solar panel on the roof and air condition it a little bit more. And I'm like, yeah, what are you air conditioning? Because houses contain a lot of stuff that's nasty, not just the cat box.
Mhm.
And all what we're doing with passive solar is we're flushing the heat out to cool down the house. We're also flushing out everything that's nasty. But if you like the stank, then don't get a passive solar house. Bask in your son's gym shoes. And that's, yeah. Yes, so as I said, sometimes humor doesn't translate well, especially mine, because I've got kind of a weird sense of humor. Do anyone have any questions about the slightly tongue-in-cheek section of passive solar designed houses?
I don't see also any questions in the chat, so I think we're good to go.
Oh, okay, cool.
But what I think always when you go for isolation, you go also for ventilation, and I have a system in mind that is working with copper wiring, because the transition from the heat is even better with that kind of system than with kind of box what you have to cool down or to transform the cold heat from outside to come inside. So that's because and that's also important to do the right way of ventilation.
Yes, yeah,
on
ventilation and well-designed ventilation is particularly important. And there was going to be someone speaking today about the passive house design method, and I really like their system of ventilation of using the heat recovery unit. And so hopefully we will learn about that future soon. But I'm going to
Yeah.
keep bouncing along here because I talk too much. So back to seriousness. So 3 case studies that I just wanted to talk about, because there's always engineers on these calls and engineers love numbers. So I wanted to talk about numbers. So one of the interviews we did was Manuela, and Manuela is an architect, and her husband is an engineer. So of course, what they have is a thermostat in the house that tracks the temperature to an Excel spreadsheet, like we all do. And she tracked the temperature in the 2 or 3 years that they live in the house. And what they've done is they've built a straw bale house, but they've rendered the walls. So I thought it was a brick house, but it was actually straw bale. And lovely house, looks very modern looking. So I said, so Manuela, what's it like here in a cold winter's morning? And she said, so Keith, I'm so glad you asked. So the coldest day here in Perth last winter, it was 6 degrees Celsius outside. Inside the house, it was 24.5 degrees. So we put the air conditioner on. We ran it for an hour. It brought the temperature up to 25 degrees. We turned it off. We didn't run it again for the rest of the winter. So, yeah, that sounds really nice. Said, so Manuela, what's it like on a hot summer afternoon in this house? She said, last year, the hottest day of the year, it was 40 degrees outside. It was 25.5 degrees inside.
Mhm.
And so we turned the air conditioner on. We ran it for an hour. We dropped the temperature to 24.5 degrees. We turned it off and we didn't run it again for the rest of the summer. So that's performance in a straw bale passive solar house in a really unideal. It was the back block of a house. They had a house in front of them on their north side, but they were still getting those solar gains because of the way the house was designed. So then, because we have a lot of Northern Hemisphere people here, I wanted to talk about Rex's house in Bridgetown. Now, Bridgetown is consistently the coldest place in Western Australia. So in winter, temperatures around 1 or 2 degrees Celsius are the norm. I call it Fridgetown because it's every time the weather report comes up in the winter, it says, and the coldest place in Western Australia is Bridgetown. So Rex is an electrical engineer who does training for Western Power, the local power authority. And so he lives in this rural place about 3 hours south of Perth. And he comes up for week blocks where he does training. So middle of winter, he closes up his passive solar house and comes up for a week. No one's in the house, no appliances on, nothing. Maybe the fridge pumping out some heat. Comes back, it's 24 degrees inside the house because he's got double glazed windows and really high levels of insulation. Nobody in the house. You know how it is, you go away on holidays and in most normal houses, you come back and it's just kind of bitterly cold inside. And it might take you 2 or 3 days to get that heat back up into the house. Nope, 24 degrees. Walked in, Chris, and he's comfortable. And then the last set of numbers, which I like talking about, is Christmas Day this year, because the world is getting hotter and we're getting more extremes of temperature. In the places that are hot now, they're getting much hotter. And it was Christmas Day. Usually here in Perth, it doesn't heat up till late February. That's but suddenly we had a week of over 40-degree days. It was on Christmas Day, it was 42.3 degrees here in Perth. That's hot. Yeah. So a question was posted on social media: how are the people who are in passive solar houses holding up with this heat wave? So I messaged 6 of the people that I have interviewed in the last couple of years, said, how did your house perform on Christmas Day? And what they said, the average kind of temperature across those 6 people was 25 degrees inside. Only one of those 6 people had an air conditioner, and he turned it on in the evening and ran it for an hour and then turned it off. And all of the 6 people were just using ceiling fans to move the air around the house. A ceiling fan, if the inside temperature is cool enough, will give you a couple of degrees, the feeling of it being a couple of degrees cooler. So see, 25 degrees plus ceiling fans feels like 23 degrees, and they were all comfortable with no air conditioners. And that's, you know, on an extreme weather day. So the last thing that I want to talk about, because I have made it my mission over the last few years to teach myself marketing and to come to understand how we can be doing marketing, looking at a combination of various marketing skills, some people who are writing about marketing, and also behavioral science and those kind of areas of looking at understanding the culture of housing and how that leads us to build houses to accept such poor quality housing as the norm and just how it is. So that's, I felt that because the people who are going to be on the call are professionals who are looking at how to deal with climate change, that this would, you know, my learnings on this would be of value. So start off, I want to say this really strongly, and it pisses a lot of people off when I say it, but scaring people isn't working. We've been talking about what a disaster climate change is going to be since the 1970s, and we have been unsuccessful in moving the needle, in changing the way people do things in any kind of large and consistent way. There are smaller groups of people. And the problem, what I find, is that when we scare people, we engage, there's 2 things that happen. We engage the cerebral cortex. People come in with fight, flight, or freeze. And it perfectly sets us up for the people who want to maintain the status quo. The fossil fuel industry is spending $1 billion a year in the US alone, almost that much in Europe, to convince people that climate change doesn't exist. So that is our enemy, is what we're fighting against, is that massive marketing campaign. And so the first one is fight. You know, when you frighten someone, they want to fight you. You say, climate change is a problem. They say, no, it isn't. Climate has always changed. That's one of my favorite lines. And, you know, once you get to that point, you've lost the argument, because they're not going any further. Or flight, they just run away. Oh yeah, that's really interesting, but oh, I think I better go, you know, Game of Thrones is on. Or freeze. And in fact, this has been a big part of that PR campaign recently, is they've shifted to this new messaging, which is there's nothing we can do. It's already too late. Do nothing. Let's just continue because there's nothing we can do. So that's not working. And the other thing that's not working is talking about sustainability. I came to the realization that, at least in Australian culture, it may be different in Europe, sustainability is a 4-letter word. What people have come to see as sustainability, the word, when they hear the word sustainability, what they hear is twice as expensive and half as good. So if it's a paint is sustainable, that means it's going to fall off your walls in a year. The detergent that is sustainable and green doesn't get your clothes clean. And so I'm just encouraging people to stop using that word and to use new words which talk to people about it. So what I've been exploring, so there's a book that was written in America called Building a Story Brand. And what they talk about is the hero's journey. You're all familiar with the hero's journey. Star Wars is the classic hero's journey story. A person, the stranger or the unknown person is chosen to go on a mission, and he goes through it and he meets a guide. There's always a guide, Obi-Wan Kenobi, whoever it is. And the guide then takes it. And what the mistake most people are doing when they are trying to sell sustainability is they want to make themselves the hero. I have come, I will solve your problems for you. And no one wants to listen to that. That it doesn't work. What works is for us to make our customers, our clients, the people who are buying our products, the hero of their story. And so that's a part of it. And this is why I say use your copy, your content, and your speaking to make people be the guide, be Obi-Wan Kenobi, to be the guide that takes people as the hero of their story. They are the heroes of the solution to climate change. And the next part of that is understanding people's problems. So this is why I talk so much about cost and housing affordability and building our houses so they're inexpensive to run. I talk about energy efficient houses, not sustainable or green houses, because no one, as we've earlier established, gets happy when their energy bill arrives. And about encouraging people to build a house that's healthier to be in, because these are kind of the end results of being in a passive solar house that nobody talks about. And I mentioned at the beginning of the call that if we do everything that we know how to do, then we will create a future which is glorious. We will bring in a new golden age. And I really want people talking about the solutions to climate change and the golden age that we're going to create, because to me, it is the best contradiction to the despair, the hopelessness that we feel as climate change activists, and the best solution to the PR campaigns that we're fighting against. So I think that's everything. How did I do on time? I forgot to look at the clock.
4 minutes left, 4 minutes left. So I would encourage Herman, if you would like to drop in your thoughts. Would love that. Anybody else on the call, love to hear your thoughts, comments, write in the chat, whatever you consider relevant, either to ask Keith or in the time that we have. Keith, you nailed it in the last points. I love that. Love what you said. Completely with you, completely agree. And I have 1-2 points around this, but Herman, would you like to, because I see you're on mute already.
Yeah, yeah. But I think that when you have a straw house or passive houses, and you have the PCM module in your house, you have even no energy needed because the PCMs will have a stable output of energy during the day, because when you see a PCM is a salt and water solution, and when you program it, then you have, for example, 21 degrees, and when it's the sun is coming, it's going to 23, but on the end you have only the 21. So that kind of temperature you get back when it's coming in the evening. So that's the reason why I think that the PCM modular is one of the new feature of the future, because then you have less money to pay for all your energy, because the how much energy you need. For example, in my house of 25 square meters, you have only
Oh no, we've lost Herman.
I think so too. Maybe
I see there's some other people on the call. Were there any questions in the chat?
no, we don't have any other questions. And I
Oh,
think,
right. Oh, okay.
okay. So you're back, Herman.
Herman is
Yeah.
back.
Yeah, I was back. But so I think that the PCM modular is could be the change, the winning change method to bring less energy in your house. So when you have the solar panels on your roof, it doesn't need for the consumption of your house, but for consumption for your things you are doing. So your laptop, your coffee machine, and that should be the new way of using less energy or less buy energy in to run your house.
That'll be amazing to learn more about. Yes. I will definitely have to make sure I finish sending that connection request to you, because I want to learn more about what you're working on.
Yes, okay. We will do.
And maybe
And,
also,
and
yeah, please.
so the time difference is not so not so stand in the way. So I also work in the night, and then it's for you today.
Yeah. So it's actually, we were making jokes in the beginning of the call with Keith that it's a good morning here and good evening over there, or good night rather to say. So Keith, once again, appreciate you taking time being here with us. Amazing point that you made. First of all, thanks a lot for introducing this passive solar house. Amazing concept, looking at, affordable solution, really by design, changing how we do things. Amazing concept. Love that we're going to have a separate session on this passive housing project. So that is something that we follow up on. And I think we're going to certainly deep dive on the element of selling sustainability. So that's a big challenge. And that's also, I'm not quite sure. I mean, Herman, you communicate about your solutions. Keith is heavy in the business in terms of talking, educating organizations, how to do it right, how to do it better, how to reach people. A lot also on the road with shows, trade shows, face-to-face contact when you have a chance to really exchange with people. And so you hear the feedback, and that's also my personal experience. People are very hungry for solutions. They are hungry. They want to see how the future looks, and they want to touch it. And that's also the job that we also have as an inventor, talking now to Herman especially, and some other people now which are on the call, talking about engineers and architects that work with amazing stuff and components of also buildings. But also marketeers or entrepreneurs and founders like Keith is just basically steering also, or getting an orientation for the companies just to how to do it better, how to reach their customers better in a more efficient way.
I keep saying that climate change is a marketing problem, not a technical problem, but there are also very exciting developments in technical solutions like what Herman's talking about that are coming through the pipeline that are just going to make it better and better. But we have to get better at talking about it, at selling it to ordinary people. At this point, you know, these passive solar houses are seen as a niche product, and there's no reason that they are, except for being bad at marketing.
It's, I mean, honestly speaking, it's just so much potential when you look at the market. It's just, you know, exploding when you look at the geographies and the usage. So wonderful, wonderful to talk with you, gentlemen in particular, but also thank you for everybody on the call, or to everybody on the call today. It was an amazing session. Final words from your side, Keith, to take away for the audience.
Really just an invitation, anybody who's on this call, to send me a connection request and any follow-up questions. If you're watching this later, I'm assuming it'll be posted. I'm still interested in hearing from you. If there's anything that wasn't clear, please send me a connection request. I accept all of them, even from the people I know are scammers. I still accept them. And let's talk, let's get this conversation going. If you want something clarified, just contact me. And if I don't know the answer to it, I will find someone who does know the answer.
Wonderful, wonderful. So with this, I would close the session for today on the Frogeex Green Tech Talk, looking at sustainable and affordable housing solutions. Thanks again, Keith Hutchings, for being today with us. We're going to have certainly some more sessions to follow. This session will be, of course, posted on our YouTube channel. There will be follow-up on social media, and there is some infographics that will be connected to the topic that will follow as well. So definitely keep you posted. I encourage you to follow the Comfortable Housing Project, which is under the lead of Keith Hutchings. We're going to certainly have also the links to that in the posts and activities that we have. With this, Herman and everybody else on the call, thank you very much for your time, for the conversation, the insights, and looking forward to see you in the next Frogeex Green Tech Talk. My name is Jana Skokan. I'm the co-founder of Frogeex, and with this, I wish you a very good rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.